So here we are. I was taking this printer apart and decided I might as well film it. This is a Lexmark x646. Got it for nothing, for good reason. Doesn't work. The printer bits worked, but the scanner bit didn't. And because the whole thing looks like what is a Linux build of some sort on its incredibly complex operating system thingy, because the scanner didn't work, the whole thing was basically useless. You could plug it into a USB port and send pages to it, but anything that used the screen, nothing worked. So this is me dismantling it because it's taking up too much space. I'd like to put my functional HP in that corner and get a bit more of my desk space back. And yeah, so I got as far as taking most of the side panels off and the auto document feeder on top, which weighs a ton for what it is. It's amazingly well built. 2 screws and then all the hinges lift off. Oh, and the 2 little wires at the back. And then now it's fiddly little screws removed and all sorts of bits. So nice touch screen. It's actually got a hard drive in it, which is unusual for a printer. Yeah. There we go. And yeah, it's quite a complex little beast, this. But it's slowly starting to dismantle it now. So that's the scanner unit. This here is the scanning head. I've had to move out of the way to get to some screws here. Yeah. Everything I've read shows that the error message I'm getting has got something to do with this silver cable, but it doesn't matter what I've tried. Nothing works. And I got it for nothing. I'm not going to pay money to have a proper printer tech come out and sort it out, so I'll just dismantle it, salvage it for useful bits and pieces, and then throw the rest in the recycling. It's all steel, and all of the panels are all recyclable as well, so we should be alright to just throw it in recycling bin. Alright, so the first interesting part out is the actual scanner head. So this fits in the top of the printer and it scans along the page, and that's what does your copying or scanning or you know, scan to email or whatever. So the interesting thing about how this works is that in here on either side are 2 thin CFL tubes. Are they CFL? Anyway, very high voltage little tubes that throw out a beautiful crisp white light. The kind of tubes that would actually be on the back of your laptop screen maybe 5 years ago, before LED became the craze. And then in there, in that slit, is actually a mirror at 45 degrees, because the pickup element is actually in the casing here. So it essentially scans one line at a time, bounces it down to the head that picks up that reading, and then it just adds up all of those lines as this scans along the page, and that's what generates your image. It's quite big. There's your inverter that increases your voltage enough to run those tubes, and that's all the logic for whatever the scanner head there. And that is this is what that silver ribbon plugged into. It goes through this nice ferrite core here, and then straight into that connector there. I've never seen that kind of setup before. Usually the core is stuck to the cable, but I suppose I don't want that weight hanging on the cable. It might pull it out of the socket, so there it is. Well, this is actually cooler than I thought. So that's the tubes there. Inside, I thought it was just one mirror, so the light would come down into this mirror here. Let's see if I get more light in here. Come down onto that really long mirror, but bounce across to the other side where there's another mirror, which focuses it up to this third mirror here, and then down into what looks like a lens, which I'm trying to get to. Yeah, that's a bit more complex than I was expecting. So I suspect that, oh, there's another mirror down there. Yeah, okay, so that mirror then bounces it into that, I think, is a lens holder there, and then the sensor appears to be on the other side of the board there. So I've lost it already. There's a plastic piece that goes on the top there. This is the little strip that scans along, the whole thing scans along. Light enters there. There's two tubes there that give off a nice bright white. There's a mirror there underneath them which reflects onto that mirror there, which then reflects it up to this mirror here, which takes it down there into that little mirror there and through that lens and onto that scanning element. And that's what makes up your image. Well, it's a day later and progress continues. Basically, the way I'm doing this is I find a screw, I remove a screw. If something comes loose, I take it off. I sort it into a pile of cool things to keep or stuff to go in the recycling. So I've managed to get all the cables off this, which appears to be the scanner board and probably the entire processor, because it's got cable. It had a cable up here heading up to the auto document feeder, so that goes up to the auto document feeder, so does that. Then it had the hard drive on it, which I've removed. It also had this little module which comes out of there that was plugged in. That's the fax modem by the looks of it. Okay, I think I was wrong. I think this is the motherboard, because that is a heatsink. That looks like a CPU under there. That other board that I initially thought was a motherboard seems to be some sort of communications board. It plugged into a riser that came out of that. This has pretty much everything else on it, so there's your USB, your other USB for plugging memory sticks and whatever into it. Network connection, because it's fully networked, and then all sorts of other things. That is the screen connector. I was wrong about that. That's another USB port on the front. Bunch of fan connectors, lots of sensor connectors, tray, paper size, video, motor, fuser. Lots of bits and pieces in there. Yeah, I'm going to keep that aside and have a look at it. That looks like some RAM there, and that's flash, and that will be the RAM down there. And obviously some sort of expansion RAM, which is interesting. Anyway, and what's left? Now we're getting to the fun mechanical bits. There's a fan, and we sort of start seeing the actual inner workings here. There's rollers, some motors in there. Those will be the fun bits. Turned it around. I've taken about as much as I can out of the other side without being able to actually get into it. Removing as much of the plastic as I can. I got this metal bit off the front, and the usual find a screw, unscrew the screw continues. This plastic is actually ABS, so I mean, if I had a 3D printer, I would totally be looking at building a plastic shredder and extruder and making my own ABS filament, but I don't, so I won't. But if anybody feels like donating me a 3D printer, please do, because shenanigans shall be had. Yeah, okay, let's carry on. toner cartridge and transfer drum. That's going to get messy, I'll just put that out the way for now. More screws. Oh, that's a nice belt. Use that in something. 3D printer perhaps. In the pile. Wires. Oh, that comes off too. Two relays, I'm not entirely what for, but those are the connectors that connected the auto document feeder to the main body of the unit. So the motor connectors, the page sensors and the head locator all connected on there, and then that goes down into the main body of the scanner of the device there, which was attached to the main board. Just having a look at this board, and it's very interesting. It's very clearly separated in the two parts. So it leads me to believe that this section of the auto document scanner, sorry, the auto document feeder, connected directly down into the unit itself, and then this one somehow looped back, and this is how it controlled the rest of the scanning functions from the top unit, which means I'm going to have a deeper dig into that and take it apart and find out why it's got so much heft. Very interesting. See, very clearly separated there, and if you shine a light through it, I don't know if you'll see this, but there's very obviously no ground plane through there. That's interesting. So this little unit determines your page size. It lies in the scanning bed like that, and you put your piece of paper over there, and it decides depending on where the light is getting reflected. So that's a little infrared LED, and that's a receiver, and whichever one actually shows you that there's a piece of paper there, that is how it calculates if it's A4, or if it's A3, if it's B4 or whatever, or if it's letter size. And that's the stepper motor from the scanner head that moves the scanning head backwards and forwards via that belt that I took off. That's quite nice. That has exactly what you need for the timing belt to fit on there. This is practically screaming turn me into a homemade 3D printer at me. Who knows, I might get enough parts out of this thing to actually do that. Got the top off, finally. Also a massive chunk of ABS. Well, whatever it is, it doesn't look happy. That's been quite seriously melted. Wow. Okay then. Anyway, back to the task at hand. There we go. Yeah, what's next? Ooh. force and ignorance. Does it every day. Every time. More. Ooh. Now we're getting to the fun parts. What do I take? Let's try and remove this so I can actually show you what's going on in here. Is this anything in there? Yeah, I think I found the actual laser head here. I'm going to examine this and figure out how to take it apart. Okay, so this spring is attached to this. Let's hope it doesn't go flying off of my face. Ooh! You know what? I have just the thing. Safety glasses. Oh, and it pops out. Awesome. Ah! Oh, oops. The spring-a-me thingy done, spring with thumb. What? The screen is actually attached to some of the paper path rollers. What the hell? How does that help anybody? I must go deeper. Okay, so I removed two C-clips that were holding this bar in place. There, somewhere over there, other side of the room. We're never seeing them again. And then that should, in theory, spell freedom, or there we go. Oh, hello. Oh crap. Oh no, there's a screw in the paper path. This thing will never print another page again. Cable ties. I hate cable ties. Ah, nice. Loose bits. Okay, we'll put that aside for now. Let's focus on the main parts. I want to see if I can do anything with that screen. So this, I believe, is the actual laser head. So I think before I talk about it, I shall have to do some research because I don't want to sound like an idiot. Do you ever get the feeling they just don't want you to take things apart sometimes?